I'm Cass and welcome to a very exciting video, as this will be my very first ever experience with Summerween. And I will finally be reunited with my best friend who I have not seen in 8 months. If you don't know, Summerween is a week-long readathon hosted by Gabby Reads, and it is something that I've seen Katie do literally every single summer. And I didn't really have any true desire to give it a go myself because I'm not really one for Halloween. However, I realized that I just want to experience fall in the summer, and that's pretty much what Summerween is. So I'll be experiencing not only Summerween for the first time, but I'll be reading my very first horror novel, which only is mildly frightening, as well as doing just so many activities. Pretty much Katie has everything planned though. I did not plan anything. She pretty much has an itinerary at this point. So many spooky Summerween things, and obviously we're gonna do a ton of reading. As for my TBR, it is a little bit ambitious, I'm not gonna lie. Not because I don't think I'll not be able to read all these books. However, my Summerween is a little more condensed. Summerween takes place from Friday to Thursday, but my Summerween won't actually start until Monday because I work over the weekend. I don't really want to start Summerween over the weekend while I'm working, so I thought I would of course start Summerween when I actually go and visit Katie. But I thought I would go ahead and intro you guys, talk through my TBR briefly, and then do some journaling as well, setting up my first Summerween journal page, which I actually drew inspiration from Katie because I had no idea what I should do for my Summerween journal page, having never done Summerween before, but luckily I was able to take a peek at Katie's page and kind of draw inspiration from that. So I'm really excited to be doing that. Without further ado, I am going to be talking through the 5 books I want to read. I will probably add maybe 1 or 2 more books. Those probably being Goosebumps books, if we're being honest. I used to eat those up as a kid, you guys, and I know Katie owns a couple, so I'll take a peruse at her shelf and try to find ones that match prompts that I don't already have matched. Which is also worth mentioning, there's prompts. Will I follow all the prompts? No. I am trying my best though. So we're struggling with the pink cover, so hopefully I can find a Goosebumps book that has some pink on it. But without further ado, for real this time, let's talk through my TBR. The first book is Scythe and Pen by A.C. Hobbs, and this is actually the book that kickstarted my desire to experience Summerween. While this isn't really like a horror or a thriller, it is a dark fantasy gothic book, and it's set in an alternative 1920s jazz-inspired city with vampires and a monster on the loose. And did I mention the main vampire we're following is actually a vampire politician? Yep, Demetrius is a vampire politician who is actively fighting for civil rights and equal rights between vampires and humans. However, there's a monster on the loose, and what I can assume is giving the vampires a bad rep and kind of pushing bad press. And then we have Gabriella, who's actually a journalist. I've heard there's morally gray characters, and I am so excited to dive into this book. And I love the early excuse to be able to pick this book up in the summer, seeing how this doesn't really feel like a summer book. This very much so feels like an atmospheric fall gothic read. Yet Summerween is the perfect excuse. I am so excited to pick this book up. Like I said, jazz age, vampire, politicians, dark mystery, like that sounds so much fun, you guys. I cannot wait to dive into this world and to dive into what is hopefully going to be very atmospheric. The next book on my TBR is actually the aforementioned, my very first ever horror novel, and that is Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. I am nervous for this book, yet it seems tame for a horror novel. Obviously, I will report back as to whether or not that's true or not, but it is set in like a dual timeline, and it feels, from the description alone, more like thriller mystery rather than like horror, but it does also interweave Japanese folklore, and I'm just really excited to experience this book. And probably, if I'm being honest, you guys, I will read this while it's light outside because it is touted as a horror book. Okay, and I am a scaredy cat. Like I said, it is a dual timeline. It takes place in October 2026, where Lee Turner does not remember murdering his college roommate. He doesn't know why or when or where or how that happened. And since he did murder his college roommate, and all evidence points to that fact, he decides to flee New York and move to his father's new house in Japan. However, this house, super sus, you guys. Animals won't approach it. The bedroom window, not always a window. And at night, a woman appears with a sword in the yard. Sounds super spooky. And then the other timeline takes place in 1877 and it follows Sen. She ends up seeing who I assume Lee outside as well, adding to the mystery. And the big tagline that really got me was, one of these people is a ghost and one of them is lying. So excited to pick this up, and I really hope that I enjoy it and it doesn't scare me too much. I feel like this is like a tame dive into the horror genre. The next book is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This book I actually saw Katie read, I think last year or 2 Summerweens ago, and it has killer mermaids. And honestly, that sounds right up my alley. Even though it is probably going to be a little stressful to read about, I think it is a thriller. And from what I understand, there was this documentary crew who went out to find said killer mermaids and then vanished, probably murdered. So naturally, they send out another documentary crew and some other people to discover what happened to the last documentary crew. And you really hope that this isn't just a circle of events gonna continually happen with the murdering and the mermaids. But I love a good boat. I love a story set on a boat. Will this scar me? Potentially. On that same vein of ocean related things, we have Ocean of Ink, which isn't necessarily super spooky, but I feel like it'll be pretty atmospheric to match the Summerween vibes. Because there's a murder and there's a lot of mystery shrouding said murder, so Ren ends up enrolling in the academy where her brother was murdered to try to suss out who did the murdering. Turns out her brother was part of some sort of secret society, and so she has to discover and probably join that secret society to figure out what happens. And so then we have Castian, and I'm assuming there's a little bit of romance. I love a book set at an academy, and I love that this promises that it's gonna be kind of a dark, dreary kind of vibe, especially with like the murder hanging over everyone's head, and I cannot wait to dive into this duology. I actually ended up putting this on my TBR and discovering it because one of my mutuals, who is also a map maker, actually drew the map for the book, and I thought that the premise sounded really interesting and the cover was also pretty and the map looked sick. So lots of varying reasons as to why this is on my TBR, but I really hope it delivers the nice Summerween mystery vibes. Then the last book I have on my TBR is The Saturday Night Ghost Club. This particular book is actually going to be a buddy read with Katie and Mackenzie, and I'm just so excited to have a buddy read for Summerween. I think a buddy read is the perfect cherry on top for this entire Summerween experience, and I cannot wait to read and talk about it with the girls. From what I've gathered, this takes place in a haunted town, and there's a ghost club that Jake forms with some of his friends and his very eccentric uncle, and I guess they're hunting some ghosts in this haunted place, and I hope it's gonna be a fun time. Those are the books I plan to read this Summerween. Will they all happen? You'll have to stay tuned and find out. But regardless of how much reading I end up doing, I just know I'm gonna have the best time ever, and I am so excited. So without further ado, let's go ahead and set up my journal, and then I will see you all in Missouri with Katie to begin Summerween officially. Summerween has officially begun now that I am at Katie's. We did our first Summerween activity yesterday, which was so much fun. And we also did some book shopping, so I have a little bit of a haul. And I started my first book for Summerween, so all in all, what a fantastic start. And of course, being reunited with Katie is always fantastic. So I thought I would share the haul with you guys. I ended up picking up 3 books and I'm really content with all of them and very excited about all of them. I don't have a half price in Florida, so very exciting to be reunited with not only Katie, but half price as well. The first book that I picked up is Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Pornak. I'm really excited about this. I heard really good things about it. Katie sung high praises, so I went ahead and picked up a copy. I also picked up Ship of Spells. This was on my fall TBR last year and I didn't quite get to it. It has a stunning map, you guys, and it also has a stunning illustration of a boat. I love a boat, you guys know that. And I also picked up The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. I have The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow, and I'm excited to give them both a read probably this fall. All of these are giving pretty fall book vibes, but regardless, excited about all of them. And also, Katie got me a gift, and it's a map of Avonlea from Anne of Green Gables, and she painted the frame for me as well, which was so kind, and I cannot wait to hang that up in my apartment when I get home. But now let's go ahead and talk about the first book. I of course started with Scythe and Pen by A.C. Hobbs, mostly because this was the book that made me want to do Summerween in the first place, so I thought what better place to start than Scythe and Pen. I am 170 pages in, which is the beginning of Part 3. This book is actually longer than I thought. It clocks in literally 5 pages under 500 pages, so it's kind of a chunky book. And it's both slow and fast at the same time. Like, we're slowly getting through the mystery and like establishing the characters and all of that, but we're spending a lot of time with each character and really delving into the environment and the atmosphere of this book, which is amazing because I love the atmosphere of this like 1920s city. And then Demetrius has been visiting like the seedier sides of town as well. And A.C. Hobbs puts a lot of care and focus on describing clothing, describing just like the atmosphere and the city itself and the different buildings and the other passerbys. So it feels like a very full city and a full world. But there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of politics and of course the shadier side of politics happening as well. There's even shadiness within like the people that are supposed to be like the good guys in this book, I would say, because there's a lot of family connections where, oh, Demetrius's father works in politics, and then there's another guy and his son works in politics and his daughter works for the Journal. So, you know, the politicians kind of have their claws in everything and talking about manipulating the media and keeping things hush-hush and maybe not, giving the full truth or twisting the narrative a certain way. And interestingly enough, these actions and these decisions are happening for the greater good in a way, or at least these characters think so. But obviously concealing and hiding the truth is never a good thing regardless of the intentions. The problem is there's currently a vampire bill going to be passed where vampires are allowed full citizenship. However, there has been 2 murders at this point. 150 pages in, 2 murders, we're killing people off quick. But 2 murders in, and both of them seem like they were attacked by vampires. With the bill going to Senate within a week, the timing is terrible for the reputation of vampires. On the same token, however, one attack or one serial killer or murderer being a vampire does not suddenly make all of vampires bad. However, there's a lot of people that remember this vampire war that was pretty recent, so there's still a lot of animosity between humans and vampires and other paranormal people, or I guess creatures in this case. There's a werewolf, there's demons. It's a very rich and full cast. I feel like we've got a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different people who have all different motivations, and some you can't quite suss out what their motivations are. So there's really layers to the mystery, not only with the mystery of who is murdering all of these people, but you also get snippets from other characters about what they're doing and what their involvement is, and I cannot wait for all the puzzle pieces to finally fall into place. I'm really, really enjoying Scythe and Pen so far. However, I think since I'm at a nice stopping point with me switching to a new part, I think I'm going to start Into the Drowning Deep as my next read. Especially because Scythe and Pen is so long, I think switching it up a little bit, changing the pace a little bit will be nice. However, first, this morning, Katie and I...
Oh, I was gonna reach my hand in and try and
Oh, there you are. I was like, speak of the devil, Katie and I, who is here, in fact.
I am here.
What are we about to go do?
At my own apartment. It's crazy.
We're kayaking.
We're gonna go kayaking right now. I'm so excited.
Woo! It's gonna be so fun. I think this will be the one activity that is more summer leaning rather than Summerween leaning. Yesterday we passed a lake and it kind of inspired us to want to go kayaking. So that is what inspired our trip.
Kayaking, we're going.
So that's what we're doing. Let's go.
Woo!
Kayaking has been done, naps have been taken, and I have started Into the Drowning Deep. And thank goodness I didn't start reading a book about killer mermaids before we went out on a body of water, because I would have been a little bit more concerned. I am on chapter 10, page 125, and I'm really having a good time reading this novel, and I wasn't expecting to have as much fun as I am. We have finally started the voyage that is the core of the story, which is killer mermaids destroy first boat, so they send out second boat to figure out what happens, because if it went wrong once, clearly it can't go wrong twice. I've really enjoyed how Mira Grant has established these characters and how we got snippets of each of them and kind of what their motivations are. Very similar to A.C. Hobbs, I feel like, establishing the characters, establishing their motivations, because you have such a big cast of characters that you're following. And this one has been going by so quickly. It feels so fast-paced, and I love the pacing of the book so far, and I'm fascinated to get to the point where things start going wrong. I've also really enjoyed the intermixing of blog posts and like news articles about things that have happened in the past, or like interviews from characters as well about their thoughts on things. I feel like that breaks up each chapter pretty well. It's not included in every chapter, but especially in the beginning, it was really prevalent in establishing what happened in the past and why the decision has been made to send out another boat, which in my opinion is absolute insanity, quite frankly. Especially because there's already certain failings on the boat and the boat just left. And yet there's a lot of money that was put into this voyage. And when it comes to things like this, time is money and money is time, and greed will always be the downfall of a lot of people. Eager to see some deaths, quite frankly. There's some characters in here that are just horrible, and you know they're gonna meet their end. However, there's also characters that you just feel so deep for. Tori being one of those characters. She is the first character we're really introduced to, as her sister was actually the camerawoman on board the first voyage, and her footage was the footage that was published to kind of make it known to the world that, you know, mermaids exist. However, it was written off as hoax. It was written off as special effects, VFX, and just like a gag from the company to kind of cover up a big tragedy. And so Tori has been determined to find out what actually happened with her sister. And with a character like Tori, you can't help but sympathize for her, but she's doing this for herself to bring closure. Yet she's established as such a good character. She was working for a whale touring company and got fired because she was like, hey, keeping orcas in captivity is bad. And her boss was like, hey, you can't do that, which is not only shown through her words speaking about these things, but her actions and how she interacts with the world and other people, and just like very, very environmentally conscious. And she loves the ocean deeply, but she also respects the ocean, which is, I think, a lot of people lack, especially on this boat. I think a lot of people are gonna die, guys, but I don't know what it is. I'm kind of excited. I'm excited to get to the thick of the action. I think a book like this isn't really that scary to me because I think I'm already terrified of the ocean. So them being like, hey, there's killer mermaids, I'd be like, I believe it. We know a fraction about the ocean. That's fair. I mind my peace and I stay away from the ocean. Easy solution. I'm not gonna be caught out on a boat heading towards the Mariana Trench. Like, no, absolutely not. Anyway, tangent about me being scared of the ocean aside, like I said, I'm really excited to get to the thick of it because I'm curious to see where this story is heading, because to me, it feels like we're heading towards an inevitable, which is second voyage, bunch of people die. Who's gonna make it back alive? Because the ship has to be captained by somebody. And it's a massive ship that they're on. Like, it's huge. There's 400 people on this ship. And if you're gonna slaughter all 400, I don't know. Seems like a lot, but excited to see. Regardless though, we are taking a little pause from our reading and our nap taking, if we're being honest, because we have another Summerween activity that I'm really, really excited to do. We are gonna be carving some jack-o'-melons, which is just watermelons, carved like pumpkins because it's summer. I am fully invested in this journey of experiencing my first Summerween, and I'm so excited for a very classic, I feel, Summerween activity. I'm going to go ahead and carve some watermelons, make them into jack-o'-melons, and then we'll see what else we get up to tonight. Probably a little bit more reading. I feel like I'm really behind in my reading, especially because of my condensed speed run of Summerween. But regardless, I'm keen to continue reading some good books and to continue to share my thoughts with you. But in the meantime, let's go make jack-o'-melons.
pushed off into the water.
I have so much reading that I've done today. I finished 2 books, and I have also nearly finished another book. The first book I'll briefly talk about because it is a Goosebumps book. So yes, it counts as a book, but it's also a very short book, you know? Katie gave me 2 recommendations in terms of Goosebumps books. The first one being Welcome to Dead House and the other one being Ghost Beach. I decided that Welcome to Dead House sounded more interesting, and she informed me that was actually the very first Goosebump book. I used to read these all the time as a kid, as I feel probably many of you did as well, and it was just kind of fun to go back into the world of, you know, R.L. Stine. I can't say it was like a phenomenal read by any means, but you know what? It was entertaining. It, you know, it threw me back to my childhood, but, you know, nothing groundbreaking really occurred in this. I did have me a little bit stressed in certain moments. I was like, oh my God, they're running through the graveyard. They're like 11 years old. They're like avoiding, you know, ghosts and dead people. I'm like, cool. Sounds a little scary. Sounds a little spooky. Perfect Summerween vibe. But the first book that I actually finished for Summerween was Into the Drowning Deep. I finally did finish. And honestly, I had a blast with this one. It was super fast paced and honestly perfect for a Summerween read. And thank goodness it was, because my other book is a little bit slower than this one. So it was nice to have something easy to read. And it kept me entertained until the end. I will say the ending was definitely abrupt. I feel like there were a lot of very convenient things occurring. There were certain decisions being made and certain actions being had that felt very improbable. Especially in terms of survival. Another thing about this book is all of the characters were incredibly stupid and it was just pissing me off. This really is like my first delve into like a thriller horror novel. So I was talking to Katie about it and we were like, yeah, I guess the characters do have to be dumb to drive forward any horror or thriller books in general. But every decision these characters were making, I'm like, what are we doing? How greedy do you have to be to like have human survival instincts be like pushed to the wayside just for like science sake, you know, and research? People were actively dying and the scientists were like, Anyway, so I'm gonna continue with my water samples. Like, what do you mean? But seeing how I don't have a lot of other like horror or thriller books to compare it to, I was entertained, and that's all I was really looking for, especially with the Summerween diving into genres that I don't usually pick up. As for the other book that I'm almost finished, Scythe and Pen, I am 372 pages in, which is chapter 84. In case that clues you into how short these chapters are, I'm on chapter 84. I like the shorter chapters. It does give the illusion that it's fast paced. We hit a point where something major happened and it really shifted the focus of the novel, and I don't think it shifted it in a way that is really keeping me engaged at all. It's gotten to the point where things have gotten so out of hand that I kind of don't care about any of it anymore. I am probably going to push through and try to finish it. I only have about 120 or so pages left, but for how long this book is, I feel like we've experienced so many different stories within this story, and still I have so many questions that are unanswered, and I keep losing track of characters because they keep introducing old characters that we saw, you know, 300 pages ago briefly, and then they're supposed to have some sort of like meaning to the story now, and I'm like, Who are you? Regardless though, like I said, I will be finishing the book, but I'm happy to report that I have finally finished some books for Summerween. It's been slow progress, mostly due to the fact that Katie and I have been on an early 2010 dystopian movie kick.
Yes, we have.
We have watched
yeah.
an obscene amount of movies. We've got, what was the first one we watched? Percy Jackson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that feels like forever ago, doesn't it?
At this point.
Percy Jackson. And then yesterday we also watched all 3 Maze Runner movies. That's 7 hours of Maze Runner watch time that we experienced.
I've never seen them before. It was something.
It was something. I remembered most of the Maze Runner, but the second 2, they were a trip, and I didn't remember hardly any of it. So that was fun. And then today we watched The Fifth Wave. Terrible adaptation, really good books. So that could be to blame for perhaps a slower Summerween than I was anticipating. Regardless though, I am still gonna try to complete most of my TBR. We also still have a scary movie to watch, which in my opinion, Scorch Trials and Death Cure were scary enough for me with the creepy zombies, but Katie disagrees and she thinks that I still need to experience a proper slasher. Slasher?
Yeah, I think I've changed my mind on what we're gonna watch.
Oh.
I think we're gonna watch the Friday the 13th remake.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
It's just slasher. It's not like, you know, paranormal scary.
Okay.
It's getting murdered at a summer camp. It's also got Jared Padalecki in it
Okay.
from Supernatural.
If I said I was excited, I would be a liar. We've already established many times that I'm a wuss. So, stay tuned for that.
You should be fine.
Thank you for your vote of confidence, Parabatai.
And if not, we're in this together.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, I'll come back with you tomorrow with an update to let you know how much reading actually occurs. We're leaning towards the
Not
lesser
wow.
side. Yeah. Perhaps the Summerween has not gone exactly as planned, but I have been really enjoying my time with Katie, so tomorrow will be my last day of Summerween. And regardless of how much reading I do, it probably sounds like you're sniffing in the background.
I'm crying, guys.
I don't even know where that train of thought's supposed to go. Like I said, I've really enjoyed my time here and I'm excited to do a little bit more reading and probably a lot more movie watching, if we're being honest. Katie and I are soon to embark on our last Summerween activity, which is exciting and sad once again, but I do have 2 different reading updates for you. The first one being that I did finally finish Scythe and Pen, and it was a journey, let me tell you. I feel like this book started off really, really strong in the beginning. I loved the atmosphere, I loved the vibe, I enjoyed the characters, but as the plot progressed, I found myself caring less and less about the characters instead of caring about them more. There was a lot of unnecessary details or unnecessary scenes, I felt, and this book definitely could have benefited by being 100 to 150 pages shorter, and I think that was the main problem, was I was slogging through so many scenes that I just didn't care about, that by the time I got to the interesting stuff, I was just so over it and just wanting to be done. I didn't realize that this was part of a series, which also kind of of affected my enjoyment, thinking that this was a standalone and how we weren't getting any answers and things were growing to bigger sizes than I thought were needed. But now that I know that there's a second book coming out, it makes a little bit more sense. However, 500 pages is still a diabolical length for the start of a mystery series, and I will stand by that. I don't see myself reaching for the second book when it comes out, but A.C. Hobbs definitely has talent with writing descriptions because, again, like I mentioned earlier, the environment of this 1920s city, the clothes the characters wore and how they spoke, very, very much so enveloped you into this 1920s jazz age inspired area. But the mystery definitely lost focus, I feel like, and it just lost my interest. And like I said, I just found myself not caring, which is really unfortunate while you're reading a 500-page book, because if I'm 200 pages in and I stopped caring, that's a long way to push through reading about characters that I didn't really care for in the end, because there wasn't even that much development for them either. This definitely ends off on a cliffhanger with many, many, many unanswered questions. So if you do end up wanting to pick this book up, if you want any answers, you're not going to find them in this first novel. Katie and I also sat down while we were doing some cozy fiber arting and we listened to Saturday Night Ghost Club. I found this book to be very interesting and outside the wheelhouse of anything I would ever typically pick up, which is kind of the whole theme of the Summerween. It's just me picking up books that I otherwise wouldn't have. This is a contemporary fiction, which is not a genre I typically reach for, and I just didn't really know what the story was about. I feel like the blurb didn't really give you much other than the fact it was a coming of age story and the main character was in a ghost hunting club with his uncle. But as the story progresses, you learn more about these characters, and I found myself, once again, not super attached to these characters and not really caring that much. I found the story to be very bittersweet and definitely had that coming of age vibe about as you grow up, the things that used to scare you, monsters in your closet or under your bed, instead turn to not being able to pay bills on time or like worrying about your family or other relatives. So I found that transition and conversation very interesting, but overall, it just was kind of an book to me. One thing I will praise it for, similar to Scythe and Pen, is even though I didn't really care that much about the characters, I found the atmosphere very, very well put. It's set in 1980s in Niagara Falls, Canada. It was really fun to see characters like riding their bike place to place and just enjoying being outside of just like the containment of the internet. And I know it's not completely true, but you know, a simpler time almost, although it's also viewed from the lens of a child. So to them, it was a simpler time, especially because they had a good life, but through making friends and all the sorts of like childhood exploration, you kind of learn of, oh, like not everyone has the same life that I do. So there was like interesting conversations and interesting tidbits sprinkled throughout the novel, but I didn't really find myself caring that much about anything. But again, I don't know if that's more of like a me problem just because I don't typically reach for this type of book. And it was one that Katie and I just kind of listened to for a few hours and I didn't go in with much of an expectation. But regardless, I am enjoying exploring outside my typical genres. And then the other book that I did start is Japanese Gothic. I am a whopping 10% in. I'm on chapter 3. So this is the first POV of Sen, who was the samurai from many, many years ago. We got a couple chapters from Lee, and so far he's a very unreliable narrator as he is often on drugs and his memory of certain circumstances are very addled, and he doesn't have a clear picture of kind of what went down with his college roommate. And we as readers don't really understand if that's the truth or fiction. He's also seeing things and hearing things, and we as readers are like, okay, is that true that there's a ghost in this house? Is it haunted? Is he actually hearing these things, or is it just side effects of the drugs that he's on? I find it to be very interesting because we know from the blurb that one of these characters is a ghost and one of them is lying, right? That is what was promised to us. So I'm really intrigued to see who is who and if we're being led to believe that one character is the ghost and one is not, when it's actually the other way around. I will be continuing to read the audiobook. Will I finish it by the end of Summerween? I'm not quite sure. I will definitely be doing my best, and regardless, I will be giving y'all an update about my thoughts, however far in that I make it. I'm going to go experience a spooky movie, try to sleep afterwards, and then I will update you with my final thoughts and wrap up this vlog when I am home. now sadly back home in Florida and ready to wrap up this vlog for you guys. Unfortunately, I did not make it any further into Japanese Gothic, but I have a very good reason as to why. We watched Friday the 13th, the 2009 version yesterday, and I just am a little bit horrored out. You know, I think I've had my fair share of scary things this week and I'm ready to put a cap on it, and I have hit my limit. So I decided that I do not need to be spooked anymore this week, and thus I have put Japanese Gothic on the back burner for either next Summerween or maybe later this fall. And in case you're wondering, yes, I watched most of the movie like this, but I did crochet quite a bit during it, so honestly I wasn't staring at the screen the entire time. But still, it was pretty scary, a little stressful, you know, people dying left and right, which I found I can handle when it is in book format, such as in Into the Drowning Deep, when people are dying left and right and there's a lot of like tension and stress, but seeing it physically on the screen brought to life, I just don't think I can handle very well. But regardless, this was actually my favorite book of Summerween. It was the most enjoyable to me. I really loved how fast-paced it was and all of the topics they touched throughout it as well. I didn't love every character, but there were so many and I knew that they were all gonna die. So I kind of kept myself detached from getting too invested in any of the characters, knowing that they may not make it to the end. However, in Scythe and Pen, I found myself not really caring about the characters when you are supposed to care about them, especially because there aren't people getting murdered left and right. Like, people are dying and there's like a mystery to be had, but none of our main characters really are in jeopardy until much later in the story. And then when that certain event occurs, I just found myself not really caring, which really sucked. So I unfortunately do not foresee myself continuing on the series. Then regarding the other two books that I read, the Goosebumps novel and then the Saturday Night Ghost Club, both of them were kind of just yet I still really enjoyed my experience reading them. The Goosebumps book was fun just because I used to read them as a kid and it was a nice little throwback, and I had no idea that that was actually the first one until Katie told me. And then Saturday Night Ghost Club, Katie and I got to listen together via audiobook and just do some cozy fiber arts together, which was a delightful experience. All in all, even though my reading wasn't necessarily the best, I didn't quite find any new favorites or discover my undying love for horror and thrillers or mystery. I do like my comfort zone of fantasy, and I definitely miss that and am looking forward to returning to reading some fantasy novels. But regardless, the Summerween was an absolute success in my book because I got to spend it with my parabatai, and I loved getting to do all the spooky leaning Summerween activities as well. I really enjoyed bringing you along with me, and I hope that you enjoyed as well experiencing my first Summerween with me, and I do hope to see you guys in future videos. Toodles!